The size of problems that AI can work on their own is doubling about every 7 months. What does that mean? If I think about the types of code that I can write with AI, maybe like a year ago, I was like tab autocomplete. Everybody was amazed. Like, oh my gosh, I can finish this line with AI. That's great. But then at some point it was like, oh, I can write an entire function. And now with agents, it's like, oh, I can write an entire app. And maybe, like for more complicated use cases, that's hard. It's easier for simpler use cases. But what if in a year, it's like I can build a full production application with just the ideas in my head and some like critical thinking? That would be insane. And so as I think about this doubling of task size, imagine what will be possible when AI can take on bigger applications, bigger tasks by itself. And I think that is something to really be excited about.
In this episode, I sit down with Matt Palmer, Head of Developer Relations at Replit, to talk about how they're transforming software development with AI. We dive into vibe coding, Replit's AI agent, and what it means for beginners and seasoned devs to be working with AI. Matt also shares his tips for getting started, staying safe while shipping, and how video is powering a new kind of developer education. If you're curious about the future of building with AI, this episode is for you. Hey, Matt, thanks for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Manny.
I'm a big fan of your content. I'm a big fan of Replit, and I thought a good place to jump off would be to talk about Replit before the LLM boom. So Replit's been around for a while as a cloud-based IDE and dev platform. You really have gone all in on AI. So I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what was Replit before the big LLM boom, and what went behind the decision to go all in on AI?
Absolutely. So, Replit before sort of the AI boom, if we think back to like last year, about a year ago, probably, amazing is all of that functionality still exists on the platform today. So it's still there. We just kind of augmented it with AI. But at its core, the platform, Replit, is a cloud native workspace. All that means is if you go to replit.com, right, we give you an entire environment where you can build things with code. And that means you don't have to worry about configuring languages, configuring packages, installing things, adding databases, like all this configuration. We just take care of that for you in the browser. And at its core, that's what Replit is. And, pre-AI, we made it easier for people to write code. You don't have to install Python. You don't have to figure out virtual environments or do anything like that. You just go to replit.com, you open a new project, and that stuff is installed for you, or it's really easy to set up. Now, what we realized, and when I say we, I mean our CEO, Amjad, our president, Michele, really great leadership, what they realized was, hey, like this AI stuff is coming out and it's getting really good. And everybody's talking about agents. This is kind of like September last year when we launched Replit Agent. What if we could just give an agent access to all the same tools in the workspace that you had? And so Replit Agent fundamentally is like a junior developer, or, I don't know, it's getting pretty good, maybe closer to a senior developer now, that has access to all of those workspace tools. And so what it can do is configure your environment, install languages, install packages, scaffold a project, and then actually write the code. So we have replit.com, this platform with this workspace where you don't have to configure anything to begin with. And now we have an agent that's going to come in on top of that and actually do it for you. And so that was kind of the transition, what we were doing before. And then, right, like Amjad and Michele were like, hey, we need to invest in this AI stuff. We need to jump in on this agent stuff. And it turns out it's just gotten really good. Yeah. And so, now you can go to Replit, build apps, vibe code, do the whole thing.
That's part of the reason why I like Replit so much. You can get access to code generation via AI assistants like ChatGPT, Claude, and now Grok. But then the problem is that you have to take that output and put it in your own environment, and you have to download your own packages, and you have to set up your own infrastructure. And the nice thing about Replit is that it's all in one place. I can just interact with AI, and it has access to all of the underlying tools, and it can just do it for me. The other cool thing is that it runs the application, it takes a screenshot, it checks whether or not it's failing, it self-diagnoses itself, and it tries to fix itself. It just saves me a ton of going back and forth to an AI assistant like ChatGPT.
For sure, exactly. And I think I even put out a demo. It got, as a matter of fact, got retweeted by Elon when Grok 3 was launched. You can just, if you really want to play around with a new model, you go to Replit, you spin up like an environment, you say, hey, scaffold this project, tell that to like assistant or something, and then you can just copy and paste the output if you want to try a new model. That works super well. But to your point, right, a lot of what we built into Agent are those intermediate steps where if you get an error, it's just going to take a screenshot. Like what would I do if I normally get an error when I'm building a project? Well, I'd probably look at what the output is, or copy and paste that into an LLM. Well, agent can do that stuff right now. So it can take a screenshot, has access to the console. Really powerful stuff, I think.
We're getting into the age of vibe coding, so beginners building out software with the assistance of AI. What's your best advice for someone getting started with vibe coding and working with AI? What are the realistic expectations that you should be setting for someone that doesn't maybe have a technical background but wants to start building out their own software and services using AI agent, for example?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a question we get a lot. I feel like I see that a lot online. People are kind of like, well, where do I start? This is kind of big, open space. There's a lot of kind of crazy stuff out there. I think my advice for anyone getting started really in anything is to just start. And that means go try a project, go to Replit, type something into the prompt box, try and create an app. It might be hard. You might bump into things that you don't understand or things that seem like a little scary or, trying anything new is that way. But I think if you just start playing with the tools and trying to understand the problem space, you're going to get there no matter what. And that's probably because, if you're curious, you'll dig around and understand like how these things work, or start asking questions to Claude or another AI model, or asking questions in Replit to Assistant. Hey, explain how this thing works. Help me understand what's going on here. Additionally, I'm going to keep always producing new content, producing new videos for people to take a look at and get started on that learning journey. But yeah, starting is the most important thing.
The nice thing about Replit is that you have a development environment, so nothing is going live, nothing's going out into the world, so it's a nice little play area for you to explore and try out different things. The other advice that I have for folks is to start with something simple, like a straightforward either Tetris game or Snake game, or like a nice stock analysis dashboard, and then get your initial MVP and then add on additional features as you clear that MVP and as you clear additional features. And then something that I'm oftentimes surprised with, and maybe you can talk a little bit to this, is that oftentimes I'm like hacking away with agent on a particular problem, and it feels like on the sixth try it finally solves the problem, like seemingly out of nowhere. So has that been your experience as well? And is that sort of the a good tip for new vibe coders? Like sometimes you just gotta give the agent 6-7 at bats before it finally fixes the bug.
Yeah, so I'll have some content out very soon about this. First, there's a course on Wednesday in a couple days. For those folks that are watching this, it'll already be out with deep learning AI, and we're going to talk about like basics of vibe coding. We're going to talk about like ways of debugging and ways of thinking about these problems. The first thing I'll say is I think you're totally right with like starting simple. And I find that like, go to agent, you give it a simple prompt, you want something very basic. And then from there, you're going to kind of build on and expand on that. That works really well for a lot of users. And if you're new, just trying to understand what agent is doing, trying to understand the things that it's building, asking AI the things you need to know about these applications, all really great ways to learn. To your point about, maybe the 6th or 7th try, hopefully sooner than that. What I've found is that sometimes, when we're working with AI, these are non-deterministic systems. These are new ways of building. Sometimes you have to give it different information. If you give a prompt to AI and it doesn't work, well, if in a debugging context, we should be thinking, okay, agent didn't solve this problem the way I wanted it to. This LLM, this AI tool didn't implement the fix or feature the way I wanted it to. What additional information, what information can I add or subtract from what I'm giving to this system in order to get my outcome? And so I see a lot of beginners, they'll say, do this thing, and it doesn't work. And then they'll say, do this thing again. And then they get frustrated because they're like in some sort of like a doom loop or unhappy situation. But they're giving the same information back to the AI system, right? They're saying just, oh, do this thing, right? And AI is a statistical system, right? Like it will produce outputs according to given inputs. And so if you can think of, well, why didn't AI produce this outcome? Was there a certain step that agent got tripped up on? Was there certain information that maybe I omitted? Or was there information that I gave agent maybe that was too complicated? Like, can I take a step back and reevaluate the way that I'm prompting this tool? And so I found that when I do that, I get the results that I'm looking for much sooner. I've also found that, Agent V2 and some of the newer iterations are better at solving these complicated problems. So yeah, I think it largely boils down to context and the information that we're providing to the model. Sometimes that means rephrasing the problem or rephrasing what we're asking though.
That's a great point. I think people underappreciate that you can add images. So I'll oftentimes add screenshots. and then I will point to things on the screen like, oh, you've got to fix this, and drop that in there.
Yeah.
Other times I'm going into, say, Grok and doing some sort of deep thinking type of prompt to get some more information to feed it into agent. Other times I'm just getting docs from an API service, and that seems to work as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes we overthink it. The more context you can provide, the more targeted context that you can provide and information that gets at the crux of the problem, the better. But that also requires you to understand the problem, right? And I'm not saying you have to understand code, but if you have something that's broken in your app and you can say, oh, I at least know that this thing is on the back end of my application. Maybe it's like in an API, or it's on the front end. It's something that's going on in the web view, or it's connected somehow to the database, and you can target agent or target assistant to the parts of the application that you want to change or that aren't working. It's a lot more valuable than just saying this thing doesn't work. So again, thinking through problems and trying to understand the root cause of things is always beneficial.
And I want to go back to a point that you made earlier around leveraging AI to learn something new. And I think this is a really cool output of AI-powered code, is that you can have an agent kickstart a project, start putting all the scaffolding together, all the file structures together, and give you like a short MVP. And then you can reverse engineer from there and say like, oh, show me how you put this together. Why did you make this decision? How does this work? And so one of the things that I often do when I'm demoing Replit is I say like, hey, once you have agent, have an MVP up and running, go into Assistant and just ask some basic questions around like, tell me about this code base. What is it doing? What are the different components? What are the different technologies that you're leveraging? Explain it to me in a very simple way, and then moving through that to get deeper levels of understanding.
100%. Totally agree. That's a pattern I do as well, right? Use Assistant to help understand the project. I always use the analogy like when we're building with AI, like previously I had to, if I wanted to learn Python, I've done this like 5 years ago, right? I had a big Python book on my desk and I had to like do the hello world example. And the hardest part of the hello world example is actually just installing Python. So like we're already past that because you have Replit, you don't have to worry about that. And now you can use agent, you can just configure an entire project, whether that's in Python, whether it's in React or whatever, right? You configure an entire project, it works. And then you use AI to deconstruct that project. And so it's like, taking apart an analog clock. That's the analogy I use all the time. It's a lot easier to take apart that clock and understand how it works than to build a clock from scratch. And so same thing with software, same thing with building apps. We can learn so much faster. And I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous of students and young people today. I'm always like, dude, I wish I was 10 years younger, because like they have superpowers. Like everyone has superpowers. It's not, maybe I'm an old dog. I should start learning some new tricks, right? But like everybody can learn at such a fast speed today with AI that I think it's an amazing opportunity.
We talked about beginners getting started with vibe coding. What's your pitch to people that already have a dev background for using tools like Replit or like Cursor that might be maybe a little bit hesitant to embrace AI?
Yeah, for sure. And, I get a ton of people that ask me, explain the difference between these tools. And they are very different. And there are a lot of tools in the space, and the space moves really quick. Like there are new tools probably today, this week, that I haven't checked out, or there's like an update somewhere that I need to go understand. But the crux of the difference there, right, is if you're using these other tools, you're probably downloading and installing some software, you're standing up some languages, packages, maybe you already have all that configured, great. And now you want to go start a new project. I have a background as a developer. I've worked as a developer. I can start up a new project. It takes time. You still have to make the directory, decide which framework you want to use, kind of sketch things out. Using AI, you have to be very specific. The biggest use case I see for Replit there is that you can spin up projects really fast. You go to agent, type it in, it's going to scaffold the entire project, build it out for you like 15 minutes. And then you can actually just deploy that. Maybe you want to tie in a database, tie in some additional services, and deploy that in like a couple, like a really full featured project in like a couple hours, a really simple MVP in like 15 or 30 minutes. And so if you're really trying to validate an idea or share something with someone, like maybe you just want to show something to your PM if you're a dev, or maybe you just want to show something to a co-founder of yours for an idea that you're trying to pitch, or maybe you just want to see if a solution works. Hey, I have this idea to a problem. I don't know if it'll work, but I really want to just give it a shot and validate this idea that I have. I think Replit's the fastest place to do that, and that's where I see sort of folks with dev backgrounds getting the biggest win. It's just kind of these really fast MVPs, these really fast solutions that they can then turn around and deploy. and then even dig in and make those more full featured when they have the time.
I'm wondering how you see tools like Replit changing the day-to-day of traditionally non-technical people like PMs or even analysts. What does that do for them in terms of being able to spin up prototypes and maybe do more coding and programming than they otherwise have been expected to do? If I think back to my days in finance as an analyst, I would say maybe 70% of analysts didn't really program. They were very comfortable with Excel. But if I go back to my finance program at college today, I'd say that all of you are going to be expected to do some level of programming, in part because it's so easy now to do. The barriers to entry are really low. So you should expect everybody coming out of a finance program today to be able to put together a pretty straightforward Python script or a dashboard that's highly customized. Whereas I don't think that was the case 5 years ago. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Many thoughts. And I think, right, it's a very big domain if we're just talking about everyone, right? So let's boil down like the finance use case first. Then I'll talk to more like the product side. I also, first job out of college was in finance. I didn't know how to code. I talked a little bit about learning Python. That's when I did that. I think even when I was first learning Python, I knew how to write a Python script. I knew how to like do some very, very basic stuff. I was always like, man, I have no idea how to deploy this, and I have no idea how to make it live on the internet. So first thing, if you can already write a script, just go to Replit. It makes it really easy to deploy. So those finance students that are like, okay, I know how to write a script. Maybe I know how to run a job that cleans some data for me or it makes my life easier. Drop that in Replit, deploy it. It takes 5 minutes, quite literally. And now you have a way to run those things without them running on your computer. Already a huge unlock. Second, if you just know like some things around scripting, being able to prompt assistant and agent, really you don't even need to know those things around scripting, but there'll be a huge one-up in what you're able to accomplish. So if you're able to triage things, jump into the code a little bit, that's all you need to know to really build like powerful applications. And I'd say more than that, just understanding logic now means that you can write in languages that you don't know. So don't limit yourself to Python. Give front end stuff, full stack stuff a shot. I think that's a huge unlock, is that these like semi-technical new grads, really the sky's the limit in terms of what you want to learn. And then specifically for finance, even if you don't know any stuff, you paste in like the structure of a CSV, or you just drop a CSV into the Replit workspace and you start prompting agent or assistant around that. I've seen it do some really powerful stuff with like creating visualizations just by supplying the data without knowing any programming. So that's the finance side of things. I think, finance professionals, data analysts, semi-technical analysts could get a really big kind of boost in productivity from Replit. On the other side, what we're seeing specifically with MVPs and prototypes is that it's changing how a lot of people think about the product development lifecycle, right? Like PMs can prototype, designers can prototype, build full-featured prototypes of their ideas. And then you go into like your design crit, or you go into your product meeting, and you can say, okay, so I have this idea for this feature. This is how it's going to help our users. And this is a working prototype of this idea. Like that's incredibly powerful. And then you can hand that off to your, design team. You can hand that off to your engineering team. They can build out a more full-featured prototype. We're just seeing like much more rich and rapid idea prototyping thanks to tools like Replit.
This is a good time to talk to us a little bit more about your deep learning course that's coming out soon. Tell us a little bit about who you're targeting.
For sure. So the user that we had in mind when we built the course is someone new to vibe coding. Course is vibe coding 101. So we'll just say someone new to AI development, someone new to Replit perhaps, and they don't understand, hey, how is Replit different? What does Replit offer? And why is it the easiest and fastest place to get started with these concepts? And so course kicks off, Michele, our president, goes through a few concepts, a few like technical details about Replit, tips and tricks for vibe coding, ways of getting started. And then I also dive into some vibe coding essentials, like ways that I think about building, basically, how I debug, how I think about context, how I think about frameworks and some of these other ideas. From there, we build 2 sample applications. So first one's a bit more simple. It's like a SEO analyzer. So you'll be able to paste in a website and like get all the SEO tags, make sure that it's like properly configured. So that could be useful for future websites that you build, future projects, right? And then the second is a bit more of a complicated example. So we build a head-to-head voting app. So you can basically vote on a national park. Well, like we load in some sample data. You can vote on, it'll give you 2 national parks. You vote on one. It'll update in real time the rankings. And so they're stored in a database, right? Drop those into a table so you can see like the total matchups and rankings. We use a ELO algorithm, which is similar to like which is similar to chess rankings. So you can basically have these rankings dynamically calculated for parks. And then for both of those apps, we deploy them as well. So end to end, right? You watch this course, you understand concepts in vibe coding, how to build simple applications, how to build complicated applications, integrate external services, and then deploy them end to end. The course is like an hour and a half long. Like it's not like it'll take you a week, right? Or 2 weeks to complete. You can get this done in a morning or something. And learn a heck of a lot more about Replit.
And it's free from what I understand.
It's free. So, we have some usage limits on agent, on assistant. So if you're not paying for Replit, right, you should be able to complete most of this course outside of the deployments part. But at a bare minimum, you will get concepts in vibe coding and how to build the first example for free. And deep learning AI, great platform. Andrew and company, all excellent people. Was working with them closely on the course, and they did an amazing job.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how, as vibe coding takes off, how beginners can ship safely. We've seen some commentary on X, for example, folks shipping applications and maybe having some security vulnerabilities in their applications. So I'm wondering, what advice can we give to vibe coders before they deploy their apps? And then if you can talk a little bit about how Replit thinks about that in terms of putting in guardrails for folks when they're vibe coding. For sure.
I'm also going to have some content on that out like this week, working on that soon. So hopefully by the time your viewers see this, that should be addressed or there'll be something to learn more. And for those listening, X this weekend, tech Twitter was just ridiculous, in part due to some security stuff, in part due to all kinds of Cloudflare, Vercel, Replit. It was just all over the place. So, I think, the industry, the community has been thinking about these problems. It's something people have been talking about a lot. And what you have to understand is that fundamentally, if you put something on the internet, if you deploy something on Replit, you have to be very careful about the data and what you're allowing that application to do, right? And I don't think people consider that when something is live on the internet, yeah, anybody can access it. Your friends can access it, but that means literally anyone can access that. And so there are some best practices in web development and in app development that are really important to consider, right? Like when you make API calls, for example, are you doing those on the front end so where people can see them? Because people can see the things that happen on your websites. This is like very basic. Are you exposing database information, API keys? Are you handling those in a secure way? Are you ensuring that other websites can't just communicate with your website without like some sort of authorization or checks, right? And so I'll have a video that goes into like these concepts in depth. What Replit is doing to address that is that apps built with agent are kind of like by default configured for best practices. So we store your environment variables securely in what's called Replit secrets. We configure agent apps to have a front end that's separate from the back end, and then the back end communicates with the database. What does that mean? It means that there is no front end communication with the database. So people can't go to your website and then just like hit the database, right? There are still, right, security considerations that you have to think of beyond what Replit does by default, but we also use HTTPS on all of our applications. We, Replit deployments have best practices and are built on secure platforms, so there are things you don't need to worry about there. What I would say to newcomers, to vibe coders, is ask AI what are best practices in web development, and then ask Assistant, is my application using these best practices? Go through this checklist, right? So you can literally prompt AI, hey, help me understand what don't I know? This is another thing I tell people. This is a long answer, so I'll wrap it up in a second here. But you don't know what you don't know. Security, that can be dangerous. So you can go to AI and you can say, hey, tell me what I don't know. And it will tell you. And then you can say, now see if I'm addressing those concerns, right? At a very simple level.
Shifting gears a little bit, we talked about finance, there being a ton of opportunities there for vibe coding and for AI generated applications. Any other industries where you see a ton of upside from vibe coding?
Yeah, I haven't thought about industry specifically, I have thought much more about use cases or niches. Like, for example, I guess like the financial analyst. That's, you know, kind of ubiquitous across industries, or the data analyst, right? Or the designer or the product manager, like, or these like semi-technical people that just want to get stuff done. But even devs, I think, you know, the amazing thing about AI and the reason why I'm so excited and the industry is so excited is because literally every single person gets a productivity improvement. And the power in AI really, it's not from the models themselves. It's not from, you know, like Sonnet 3.7 is a great model. All the models are amazing. They're all productivity improvements. The power is from understanding domain specific knowledge and then understanding what AI is and how that can augment the domain specific knowledge or augment your workflows to make them more efficient. And so, you know, what specific industries or use cases are underrated? If you're watching this, there is a way that AI can make your life easier, better, etc. And that's the amazing thing. So any information that you have, right? Like maybe I sell like flowers. I don't know. I have a flower business. That would be awesome. Maybe one day. I bet that there are a bunch of antiquated ways of doing things for my business that I could automate with AI, or that I could build little apps with using Replit to make my life easier. And the way that you find those is you just like think about your day, think about the stuff that you're doing, and then think, could I make this better? Could I automate this? Could I like, what is preventing me from doing my best work? And then try and understand the tools that exist and map them to those problems. So I think that's why AI is exciting. Like everybody can benefit, really.
To your point around devs in particular getting a huge boost in productivity, I recently wrote an article on agentic workflows in finance, and Goldman Sachs was saying that the biggest boost that they saw was from giving agentic capabilities to their development team. It just allowed them to just, you know, 10x their productivity, move faster. And
Wow.
my sense is that in part that's because they have the domain expertise, so they know their code inside and out. And so I think people that know their domain very, very well can, one, prompt really effectively and tell the agent exactly what to do. And when things get stuck, they have the terminology and the ability to direct the agent appropriately. And then thirdly, they have the domain expertise to double check the work of the agent. And so they can see like where the agent made an obvious mistake or is maybe getting a little bit stuck. So to your point, like, yeah, once you give these tools to people that have that domain expertise, you just see a huge boost in productivity.
I 100% agree with that. And, you know, like a couple of weeks ago, I was at a meetup and somebody asked, well, who benefits most from AI? And, you know, the answer, I think the consensus response was like senior ICP has been around for maybe 4 or 5 years, been out of school and just knows their domain super well because, to your point, they know the frameworks, they know the terminologies, they know what a right answer looks like, and they know what needs to be done. And so you give them these tools, you give them superpowers, and they can just take that. They say, okay, here's what I've been doing. Here's the more efficient way to do it. Here's the better way to do it. They augmented that and they get 10x better, right? And so, you know, if you're watching this and you're like, oh, that's me, start playing around with tools because, you know, like you can do really amazing things. If you're watching this and you're like a student or a new grad, that's cool too. Don't worry, because what we just talked about earlier is you can learn all those things by prompting AI. And so I think it's like, right, AI, like you have a bit of a moat for people that are like, have really domain specific knowledge, but that moat is like smaller because now we can all learn faster because AI, right? So like I might say, I don't really know much about web security. I'm scared of building this app. Well, I'm going to go to Claude and I'm going to do some really good research. I'm going to use Google and I'm going to use like all of these tools that are available and close that gap. And then I'm going to go out and like build the stuff that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So yes, I think people who are in a really good position have been, you know, like have some really domain specific knowledge, but also it's a lot easier to acquire that domain specific knowledge these days.
Can you talk a little bit about Replit within traditional larger organizations? So I would imagine that, you know, startups love Replit. I'm wondering, how is a tool like Replit being received within more traditional organizations? How are they using it? Is there any pushback? Any creative use cases that you're seeing?
Yeah, for sure. And so we have some really cool partners, some really cool customers. One in particular, company that's been around for like a couple 100 years. Not sure if I can mention like specific names here, but they basically like leapfrogged. They were like doing things like in a very traditional manner, let's say. They leapfrogged like every modern development and design tool, like Figma, like all this other stuff. They went straight from this very traditional way of doing stuff to prototyping on Replit. pretty awesome, right? And so like that's one thing we've seen. We also have a bunch of other, kind of more maybe tech first. Like one of our colleagues, Kevin at Coinbase, posted a really great example of like, here's how, he's basically using it for DevRel, sales engineering, just like sharing demos really quickly. That's amazing. But I guess to more directly answer your question, we do see like more traditional companies that are just like, we're going to try this thing out, we're going to give it a shot, and we're going to see how it can improve our workflows. I actually think that's pretty amazing, because you can skip like this intermediate step of all the tools that are being used today and just like use Replit to prototype to build internal tools, rather than paying like $50 per seat per month for some SaaS tool that you could build in like half a day, right? And that's better for your use case.
We've seen tools like Replit come a long way in a very short period of time. I guess as you look ahead 6 to 12 months out, what are you most excited about? What do you think is going to be some new capabilities or some major unlocks that AI-enabled builders are going to get?
Yeah, man. Dude, there's so much to be excited for. And I feel like 6 to 12 months, like look 6 to 12 months back. 12 months ago, I wasn't using AI to write any code. That's crazy, right? Even 6 months ago, that was like Replit agent launch. That was like first, like AI building was starting to take off. We've only now defined the term. I mean, who knows what it looks like in a year? I think that's largely predicated by the foundation models. But it seems like AI tools and really agentic frameworks are just getting a whole lot better at tool use, a whole lot better at being able to kind of reflect and iterate. And so I think about this. I think there's a really great graphic shared last week by the dev Alex Albert at Anthropic that says like the size of problems that AI can work on their own is doubling about every 7 months. What does that mean? If I think about the types of code that I can write with AI, maybe like a year ago, I was like tab autocomplete. Everybody was amazed. Like, oh my gosh, I can finish this line with AI. That's great. But then at some point it was like, oh, I can write an entire function. And now with agents, it's like, oh, I can write an entire app. And maybe, like for more complicated use cases, that's hard. It's easier for simpler use cases. But what if in a year, it's like I can build a full production application with just the ideas in my head and some like critical thinking? That would be insane. And so as I think about this doubling of task size, imagine what will be possible when AI can take on bigger applications, bigger tasks by itself. And I think that is something to really be excited about.
And what do you think is going to be the impetus for that? Is it just a matter of better and faster LLMs?
Somewhat, but I mean LLMs are pretty good already, honestly. Yeah. I think it's developer experience, so maybe vibe coder experience, or just really the developer tooling. And I say developer, when I say that I mean everyone's a developer. But if you think about things like Replit, right, we take care of the workspace. That's like a huge win for AI, because now AI is operating within a predefined space. And so the models are already really good. I think it's just like, now I think about the problems that I run into with building with AI. The tool doesn't do the thing I want it to. The tool breaks because it doesn't have perfect information over something. The tool doesn't understand the visual output, or AI misunderstands what I'm trying to do. Most of those things can be solved by better supplying context to the model and making more targeted edits and having better tools to use. For example, pulling documentation, bringing in accurate context. And so I think the limiter is potentially the tools that AI has use of, and the for agents in particularly, like sort of the feedback loop of diagnosing problem, accessing relevant context to problem, and then applying relevant fix to problem. But like, I know that's something agent has already gotten a lot better at, and our team is like working hard on. So I'm very excited for that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you're right. We've come a long way in just 6 months. So looking out 6 months it's going to be wild what we're going to be able to do. And I'm just so excited about it. I think it's going to be just amazing. The vision that I paint for folks is that imagine a world of infinitely customizable software. So if you have a video conferencing tool and you want to customize it in a particular way, you want it to be exactly built for you, you're going to be able to build that. We're not quite there yet, but these models and these agentic workflows are only going to get better.
100%. And to your point, I think some people are there, right? It's just dependent on the level of experience you have. But like what we saw from like Levels.io, dude just like vibe coded. This is not even Replit specific. Vibe coded a game. He had a massive following already, right? So, but he made like a bunch of money on it. So that's someone with more developer experience and more building experience. But like as AI gets better and as these tools get better, that gets lower. And then to Manny's point, like, well, in a year, one day, you have an idea for this app that you always wished existed but never did, and you have the product sense and you identify that gap in the market and you just bring it into existence. You could start your own business. You could make your life better. You could customize your software to your exact use case. That's really exciting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Incidentally, I was just showing Replit to someone, never programmed anything, and they used Agent to build out a simple Tetris game, and that just lit them up so much. They were like so excited. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I programmed this! Like it works!" And they were playing with it for a while, and it was just so fun to see. So I think we're just gonna see more of those moments in the future.
And that's that's the other thing, right? Like getting started. I talk about learning Python and doing a Hello World example. It takes me a morning, and what's the result? I print Hello World in the console, right? But today, you get started, you can build a game. Like that's super cool.
Shifting gears a little bit, I'm wondering if you can talk about how you think about video. The way that I connect or found you was through your great content on YouTube and on X, and you're sort of a developer relations person, but you combine that with video. Tell me about what video does for you and why you've developed the skill over time.
Yeah, I think I've put out a lot of thoughts on DevRel and developer advocacy, and I think you don't need to make video to be a great or even amazing developer advocate or engineer. There are many like developer relations like legends that don't make video, but within that kind of career field, or if you're just somebody that likes sharing what you build, video is just like such a great medium to be able to express yourself. And I think that like the possibilities really with any type of content are endless, but video in particular, you get to determine what the final product looks like, what the lighting's like, what you share. Do you share your screen? Do you share your face? Do you, like how end to end for the experience of the viewer or the learner, you get to customize everything. And so when I thought about, I was at Replit, when I started sharing more video, and I was trying to think about what are ways that I can make a difference and connect with people. I really love talking. I really love getting in front of the camera and just expressing myself because I think I bring a unique perspective to problems and sort of the content that I create. And, I just think video is a engaging, really powerful medium. And so I just started, right? And I said, hey, I'm going to take the content that I create and get in front of a camera and share it with people and walk through it and explain myself and explain why I think it's important. And that resonated with people, and that was really powerful. So that's kind of how I got into it, and that's kind of my thought process.
What do you think were some of the hardest parts to get over when you were originally getting into video?
Oh man, there's so many hard. I mean, that's why like not a lot of people do it. And I mean, Manny, you create great content as well. Anybody watching this obviously knows that Manny makes great content since it's his podcast. But there's sort of the psychological side to it, which you just like literally need to talk to people and sit in front of a camera and say dumb things over and over again. Like I do that still. Sometimes I'll sit down to record a video and it's like performing in some sense, and it's just like not there, and your brain isn't working. And you're like, man, this really sucks. Like, this is really hard. But you do it over and over again. You sit down, you do the work, you practice. It's like any other skill. And you find over time, I can get into that flow state a little bit faster. The words are coming to my mind a little bit quicker. Or you can map problems to solutions. I've spoken about this thing before. I can speak intelligently about it now. Then you can eventually go on podcasts without embarrassing yourself, or I hope I'm this far without embarrassing myself, right? And speak well, and that's really challenging. The flip side to that is the technical aspects are difficult to get into. It's still really hard, right? If you want a nice camera, you have to learn about how cameras work. That's like physics, man. If you want nice lighting, you have to learn about how lighting works. If you want nice screen recordings, you have to evaluate all these tools. You have to understand how to edit video. You have to understand all of these things, and you have to evaluate if really they're important to the end result, right? Like there are a lot of people that make video, like the editing isn't that great, but the content's amazing. And so, it's kind of like stack ranking priorities, figuring out what's important, figuring out what you can focus on now to create the best content, and then figuring out every day how you get 1% better. I have my video. How do I make the screen look a little bit better for people? How do I make the lighting look a little bit better for people? And it can seem like a really big, ambiguous problem. It's breaking it down, understanding all the possible ways that you could make your content better, and then knocking them out one by one. But I think it all kind of revolves around that capturing people's intention, being dynamic, being able to speak well, and being able to clearly explain your ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I gotta say, it still feels weird talking to myself into a camera. So like I'm oftentimes doing that. I'm like, wait, it just feels so unnatural. So that's what that thing still, after doing a ton of video, that still feels kind of weird. But yeah, then you get into all the technical stuff, the lighting, the camera, the editing, the copy. It's a whole thing. What do you think has been the biggest benefit to the Replit community having all of this great video content out there? And why do you think it's still an underappreciated go-to-market motion? At least when I look at other startups and other companies,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's doing as good of job as you and Replit in terms of building a community and sharing your platform via video. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, that really means a lot to me. Thank you. I put a lot of effort into what I do, but also, we're doing our best. And I agree. I think that more people could be, I'm starting to see it pick up a little bit more, this like technical content creation, some of the technical marketing stuff, and then also like a lot of influencer marketing. But first thing is, I think people like people, not brands. And so for me to come on and be pretty relatable and show you how I build something, but then also how I make mistakes and like get into errors and get around them, I think is powerful. It's very humanizing. My goal when I create content is to be educational first and foremost. Second, to have fun and like not be a robot. And third, to help people understand what they're capable of, because they're capable of more than they think. And so doing that in like a very human and approachable way, it's not Replit, this ambiguous tool that there's some people behind the curtain kind of like pulling strings or something. It's like Replit, the company where Matt works and can help me fix stuff. And so, when I have that relationship, I think I have that relationship with a few companies that do this well. That's largely where I've taken inspiration. That can be really powerful for creating a community, for helping people feel like it's not so hard, right? And the most powerful thing about video that I didn't mention is if you do video well, somebody can open this video, do exactly the stuff that you do, and get the result. And that certainty, right? Like if I follow a tutorial, it might break. It might not work. I might do something wrong. But like if I'm watching you on the screen and I do everything that you do, I know with certainty, it feels like someone's kind of holding your hand and you get to the result. So I think that's really powerful. And then I think the idea of creating a person that feels like they're there to help you along is really powerful in my own life, and that must resonate with people somehow. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your point around people resonate with other people, not brands or tools. And
yeah.
What we have is a bunch of tools, but when you add that personality on top of it, that continuity, I think it just goes a long way in helping people get more familiar with your brand. All right, so we're wrapping up here. I wanted to take you through a couple of rapid fire questions. So let's kick off with this. What is your go-to AI assistant?
I mean, Replit assistant, it's in the name, right? That's the easy response, I think. I'm building in Replit most of the time. I use assistant for most things. I will say I bop around different models to get different things. So, they're all tools, and it's like having a toolbox. So try what works for you. And yeah.
And if you're not using Replit, are you using like Claude or ChatGPT? And if so, what's your favorite?
All of the above. And to that point, tools for different solutions. I find Sonnet is really great for prose, really great for writing code. Obviously, in Replit, we rely on Sonnet and a few other models. Grok is really great for relevant, up-to-date content, right? You can go on grok.com and be like, hey, tell me about this like weird thing that happened this weekend, and it like will, which is really cool. So I use it for that. GPT, there's a bunch of stuff ChatGPT is great for. And the Whisper models and some of the new audio models are really cool. So I would say, I find myself, I use Claude a lot, but I use all of the different tools because they're all really great and they bring something unique to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I've got shortcuts to all of the major AI assistants, and sometimes I'll use them at the same time. So like I'll ask ChatGPT for an opinion on a piece of content, then I'll ask Claude, and then I'll ask Grok and try to synthesize like the best response.
I love that.
Okay, so what is your most commonly used prompt?
That's a good one. I've been doing a lot of like YouTube transcription. So basically taking my video. we're talking about video. You have video. One of the powerful things about video is that you kind of unlock these other forms of media from creating video. So if I walk through a concept in video or I explain it and I get a really good transcript of that video, then maybe I pull in some additional resources like some documentation or some like screenshots. I can then prompt AI to create blog posts, create tutorials, create other things from that video. So I've been seeing myself use prompts very commonly to take video and do other stuff with it, whether that's take video and generate a YouTube description with timestamps, take video and turn it into a blog or something that, for other people that want to read something. It's not a specific prompt, but that's kind of like a workflow I've been kind of thinking about lately.
I love that. Yeah. Incidentally, I built out a YouTube transcriber in Replit. So you give it a link to a YouTube video. It downloads the video, transcribes the video, and then you can chat with it there in real time. And that's been super helpful for me. So like if I'm getting up to speed, like on interviews, I'll grab your most recent interviews. And it's like, okay, how did Matt introduce himself? Or some of the interesting questions there. Like it just helps me like get a process video much faster.
That's very cool. I actually have a similar workflow built out, so we'll have to swap notes on that after.
All right. Next question is, what's one unusual or unexpected way in which you use AI that might be surprising to people?
Okay, I have an answer for this one. I'll say one way that other people use AI that surprises me. So like, I have friends that are, believe it or not, I have friends. Specifically, I have friends that aren't in tech. And so I've shown like AI systems to them and now they like fact check me with ChatGPT for like things that are opinions too, So I'll be like, I'll send something over and they'll be like, actually, ChatGPT said this. That drives me insane. So there's an unexpected use of AI that I've seen in my life. What's a way I use AI that might surprise people? I think, just using it like for literally everything, like using it to synthesize notes, to your point, using it to understand video, using it to reformat content or take content and turn it into social content or just basically move information around is a big one. Using it to drill into topics and learn. Maybe these are all expected. I don't know. But yeah, off the top of my head, that's what I got.
Gotcha. All right, let's wrap up with a tough one. Who wins, open source or closed source LLMs?
Oh man, like all these questions, like I could say one thing and then like literally tomorrow they drop like I think they did drop a new DeepSeek model today, like literally before this call. And it's like on Hugging Face and I have no idea what the results are of that. So either way I answer this question, I'm probably wrong. I don't think anybody knows. I think what I will say is that what we're seeing is that a lot of like frontier kind of like state of the art models are closed source, right? If I think about Sonnet, still for coding, Sonnet's kind of king. ChatGPT and Grok and all of these tools. I think it's hard when you have companies that are building entire data centers and dumping at this point billions of dollars into researching these models. However, it's also very inspiring to see like, oh, this team out of China, this is like kind of crack squad, like smaller team just comes out, drops a really competitive model. So I don't want to take anything away from the open source community. I think that's driven software leaps and bounds, and I think it's driving LLMs leaps and bounds. So I think it's incredibly important. But the state of things, it seems like many models are closed source that perform very well.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough, but looking forward to see what happens. All right, Matt. Hey, thanks for coming on the show. Tell us how people can check out Replit. Tell us where folks can find you. How can they connect with you?
Amazing. Thanks, Manny. Thanks for having me, first and foremost. Replit, go to replit.com. If you want to watch YouTube videos on Replit, since we talked about video, youtube.com/@Replit. I also put out videos on my own channel, youtube.com/@Matt Palmer. Those tend to be Replit adjacent or like more technical deep dives. All of the most relevant stuff's on the Replit channel. And then I'm probably too active on X. Like it's a bad habit, but it's fun. So x.com/MattPal. So MattPPal. We'll have links to all these things. Those are the big ones. But yeah, thanks again.
Awesome, Matt. Thanks for coming on the show. Keep up the good work.
Likewise, I appreciate it.